You love those, don't you?
Okay.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody. Welcome to this council meeting. Welcome to staff, the media, Port Otago representatives and councillors. This is the third attempt we've had to move around the region, and unfortunately unsuccessfully earlier on in the year we missed out going to Queenstown and Oamaru at different times because of COVID, and now we're unable to move down to Balclutha for a council meeting because of the fragility of the electricity network, and it's got nothing to do with Aurora, so I won't mention any other names. But welcome everybody. We have an apology from Councillor Robertson. We have Michael Deaker on Zoom, and Carmen Hope will join us shortly on Zoom. Otherwise, I believe everyone else is here. So, item 2, just confirmation of the agenda.
Happy to move the.
Oh, sorry, moved by Kate. Beg your pardon. Second by Gary. Apologies, to be accepted. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Sorry, Liz. Confirmation of the agenda. Any additions must be approved by resolution with an explanation as to why they cannot be delayed until a future meeting. Moving on to item 3, conflicts of interest. Just the general reminder for everybody to be aware of any conflict of interest. Anyone wanting to declare anything at this point in start of the meeting? No. Moving on to the public forum, we have no request. We haven't received a request for anyone to present at the public forum. However, item 5, we have a presentation from Port Otago. We've got Paul, Steve, Kevin and Pat with us, and essentially we're in your hands, and we're obviously focused on the Port's annual report. And yeah, you'd like to take us through, Paul, Kevin?
Yes,
thank you.
Andrew. Thanks for doing introductions for me. That's great.
No, your microphone may not be on. Just need to press the little red button.
That better?
It's the second one in, so not the microphone one, but
Okay, it's on now.
one.
I always thought it was a microphone.
Okay,
Sorry.
we're here this afternoon to present our annual report and our results for the calendar year ending in June 30, a bit later than usual. Largely COVID related in the Auditor General, but still in September, so we're still doing quite well. You'll see our new look annual report in front of you. We've called that Reflecting on the Future, which is, I think, a really neat sort of a twist between looking back at our results and looking forward at what those results mean we need to do in the future. So it's what we call an integrated report. It's not just a financial report. And it's our first effort at an integrated report. We're going to get better at it, but we're still very proud of what we've produced for you today. At our workshop in August with the councillors, we talked about taking a new look at our business. And this report, we basically, the theme for the previous 10 years was about infrastructure, deepening, warehouses, wharf extension, that sort of thing. And while there's still an element of that, we really want to look at our future and beginning to look at our future from a sustainability perspective. And this annual report, I think, articulates that quite well. I'd like to make this a conversation rather than a presentation. While we do have a request for questions in our slide at the end, if anyone's got a question during the presentation, I'd much rather it be dealt with while it's topical and current. And I've got an army of people here to help me with the answer, so I'm fairly confident. So
Thank you.
That's just a just the flavour that I'd like to portray. Yeah, so integrated reporting is becoming an industry standard. One or two of the other ports have begun to do it. I think we've done it better, but and it's our first effort. that address all the elements of capital that we employ to get value from our enterprise. And you'll see on the first slide, now it's very hard to read on the screen, but in your book it's on page, what page is it? 17. So you can look at more closely there, but all I'm trying to do really is introduce you to the report rather than actually have you digest everything on this page now. But basically we've divided, we believe we've got 6 capitals, not just assets. The first capital is our team that works at the port. The second capital, we believe, is our wider team, which includes our customers and our community around the harbour and beyond. And the customers we mean by anyone that participates in the supply chain, obviously right out to the people that grow the trees, the people that grow the lambs. So we see that as our wider team. Kevin often refers to it as the Highlanders catchment, right, Kevin? Yeah. Our harbour and beyond, that's the environmental side of things, the biodiversity, our care for the environment that we're operating in. That's our third capital. Our fourth capital, we believe, is our know-how and our skills, generated by hiring the right people and training and learning from our experience. And then the fifth capital is our assets, which you would have seen in any year. And our sixth capital is our financial value. So we have tried to report our performance in our prior year on the basis of those capitals. And you can see how each of those capitals contributes to the supply chain. I'm not going to go through those numbers, we'll do that later. But on the right-hand side, you can see that we have our vision for our outcomes, and we also have a column that talks about places we're not there yet and we have to work on. We call them our work-ons. So we started our materiality survey. You know, in order to get to this point, we had to, let's see, change the slide. Yeah, we had to decide, we had to get some consensus about what was important for us to focus on. And we recruited a very capable consultant, which we basically just dealt with over Zoom for the whole period because she couldn't travel to Port Chalmers. But she facilitated a materiality survey, and some of you people, I think, participated in it. I certainly did. We went out and spoke to, how many, Kevin? Lots.
It was about 30.
30 stakeholders.
20 external.
Yeah, and 20 of those external. And through a very, through a survey and an interview process and a conversation with the consultant at the board table, we prioritised our material issues according to this chart here. Workplace safety being number 1, public health and safety ranking number 3. But this was because, well, we believe that it got so much attention, public health and safety, because we're right in the midst of level 4 lockdown, and we being a border industry, our customers or our stakeholders pointed out to us that we had a big responsibility, and it was a very important task we had in operating and protecting the community from any sort of public health risk, including COVID-19. We have, I know that I'll preempt this question or this comment, but with climate change at number 10, we believe that was a symptom of people's state of mind during the survey process, and that we think that if public health and safety hadn't been sitting right up there, something like climate change would have been much higher and right up there. It wouldn't have just moved up one, we don't think. But anyway, we're focusing on that whole 10, and climate change is certainly in there.
Pat, it's just a question from Hillary.
Sorry, Hillary.
Did you
Paul, sorry.
find that was a good way to present that with priorities like that? I mean, these things seem to me to be hard to prioritise. Was there a need to go there? I mean, do you have to say safety is more important than leadership or something.
You make a good point. And,
Yeah,
and as
I mean,
long as they're
it's
in the
sort of-
top 10, then they're going to get our attention. And it's not, we're not going to
in
give
some
more.
ways, a circle might have been or just,
Yeah.
I mean, you pointed out that climate change being at the end is just probably a moment in time or
Yeah.
something, but all of those are priorities, sort of, aren't they? So perhaps the order of them is
Yeah, you'd like to see them
unhelpful, sort of.
Yeah, you don't want to see them compared against each other in terms of priority. You'd sort of say these are a set of priorities and mix them up, sort of thing.
Like the first and three is safety. I mean, of course, safety's important with everything you do, sort of, but you have to do the everything too.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, you make a good point.
Anyway,
And
I'm
there's
just,
a number of ways of. We did have the data to do it, and maybe we were blinded by too much data on it, and we should have just been more average about the. More sort of group them together as priorities rather than try and rank them. But
Yes,
I hear what you say.
some of them are.
And you can look on page 19 as effectively where the stakeholders rated them out of 1 to 5, as 5 being the most important, versus the business impact as rated by the business. And that gives you a bit of a shape of how that list was derived. But you're right that workforce safety doesn't matter whether you're in the business or outside the business. Everyone's going to say it's critical how people go to work every day and come home in one piece.
Yes.
So I think that's
Yes, they're critical rather than,
it's a given.
yeah, sort of thing.
And then you get into the debate on priorities, and you can see there that the 10 that were picked, apart from climate change, effectively are well up on the scale. And that's our focus over the page.
Yeah.
Yes.
Quick
But there were a
question
lot
for
of learnings as we developed this list that you'll see quotes from stakeholders, and there were a lot of learnings for us that we were somewhat unaware of that we discovered were important to our stakeholders. And you'll see that as you read through and we sort of tried to reflect that through the quotes that we got, direct quotes from individual interviews that we had with some of our stakeholders.
Paul, a question from Michael. Laws?
Sorry, you've got a list of where your stakeholders are somewhere in here, the people you consulted?
No, we don't. It's not disclosed in here. It was a cross-section of our external and our internal stakeholders, Michael.
Some of them are mentioned by name
Yes,
on page 25.
you'll see them scattered through the report.
Right, because I'm really surprised that you are responsible for dealing with terrorism activity.
Well, that's a requirement we have by law. So the
Explain to me.
Maritime Security Act requires us to respond and act with government. So we've got obligations under that act that if there's an event of terrorism, the government actually takes control of the port. And we're no
Rainbow
longer
Warrior.
responsible for...
Rainbow Warrior.
Yeah, in that
How does
instance.
that-
So it's just obligations we're disclosing.
Protecting our region from drug importation and terrorism activity. Doesn't that sound slightly grandiose, that you're protecting Otago from terrorism activity?
Drug importation is a critical focus
Oh, I
for...
said terrorism activity.
Yeah, well, we're part of the defence of
The role.
effectively border defence in New
It's a
Zealand.
border.
Yes, everybody is on that basis. But
Yeah, that's true. Everybody is, but we're not stepping back from it.
So essentially, it's...
sorry.
You go.
Maybe if I could try to help to clarify the situation. You also have transshipments of potentially explosives and other things that come through that could be attractive to terrorists. That would be true as well, wouldn't it? Which would mean that you would have obligations in terms of making sure they don't fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah, absolutely. But we actually let the explosives come through Littleton rather than Port Otago. So that's one we try to avoid just because of the location of the port.
The long and short of it, you've got a mandatory responsibility by the sound of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
You can't be a break in the border, can you? You've got
Okay.
No, we mustn't underestimate our role as as a point on our border, particularly and it's become even more clear now with the pandemic how critical the role is for our pilots getting on board a ship that's been at sea for 15 days from Philippines or something like that. We've got a role to have protocols and safeguards in place that pilot doesn't pick up a disease and bring it ashore. And it's no different with whether it be drug trafficking or peripheral terrorism kind of routes.
Okay.
Okay. Next one. Great. This slide, which is taken directly from the annual report as well, shows the steps of our sustainability journey quite clearly. We started with stakeholder engagement and we identified their material issues. We considered where we bring value and adopted integrated thinking. The strategy that we adopt using this approach is a work in progress, and we're not there yet, but it will include aligning our goals with our stakeholders' expectations and finding new opportunities to create and protect value across, an important thing, protect value across our entire value chain. So this is just a slide that shows you how we are integrating our materiality survey with our strategy. We've identified the risks that the business faces, which we've had a clearer picture from this materiality survey about the risks that the business faces. We have risks to financial returns, loss of a major customer, some reason that the port can't operate, withdrawal of a shipping line, obviously COVID-19. Public health and safety, we've talked about. Workplace safety, we've talked about, and that obviously came up number one in our materiality survey. Climate change, we've got a risk of increasing extreme weather events. We've got a risk of the cost of operating with and the change that we might have to make to operate with a lower carbon footprint. We have biodiversity, the impact on wildlife resulting from our operations in the harbour and on the shore. Nuisance, responding to noise, dust, emissions, and of course biosecurity, which has been there the whole time in terms of things, like foreign diseases, foreign organisms getting into the country.
Hilary.
I don't see on this list legislative things. Do they just weave in and out of the other ones? Or
well,
a risk of being illegal, as it were, not following the legislative requirements. Is that a risk or?
It's a risk. It probably ends up as a financial risk if we're prosecuted for something we don't do. But you mean something that we don't have a license to operate, or we don't have a consent,
or the government tells you about terrorism and you don't follow. I mean, there's right. Presumably you're under all sorts of legislative requirements.
Yeah.
Or the Auditor General says that you're just not doing what you ought to be doing.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I suspect
all of them are government requirements that you may or may not adhere to. Or, so they just come in amongst the others.
They would point towards one of those material risks, I think. Like if it was you can't operate because you don't have a consent to do this, then that would obviously be a huge financial risk. That's closure of the port sort of thing. But I take your point. Yeah, we could add that.
Just doesn't come in the little descriptions. It doesn't seem to.
So we have a legislative compliance register though that's been reviewed by our lawyers, and it has all our mitigations against different areas, all the various legislations that touch the port.
Yeah, so I'd just
Look, I think this was framed around the stakeholders' view of risks in the port. So this was both an external view of what they considered to be the risk to the port as part of our materiality survey output. So probably what you're touching on is inherently what we have to manage and govern in the port on a day-to-day. So this is sort of their view of the world that we've incorporated and shaped into our thinking.
What page is that on?
It's on page 35.
35.
So that other stuff that is, compliance and a requirement for the governance of the port sits fairly squarely with our board and management to manage.
But it comes in at your risk board
clearly
thing, just
yes,
not in the thinking here.
Quick question from Michael Laws.
Yes. Your answer to your last question actually was almost the answer to this one, isn't it? All those material issues are essentially statutory responsibilities that rest upon you. What, in addition to those statutory responsibilities, do you do? There's your list, there's your material issues. They're listed on the left, on the right are your responses to those. But at the end of the day, like for example, public health and safety, the safety of your own workplace, you have statutory responsibilities to do that. You're going to do that whether you say that you're going to do it or not. You don't have an option.
Yeah.
Are there any optional extras on that? Or are they all statutory responsibilities? Like, for example, you're not allowed to go and pollute the harbour, and you're not allowed to destroy native or indigenous wildlife or vegetation. You're not allowed to be a nuisance, because if you are, you'll have legal actions put against you. Are there any additional things that you have that are not currently statutory responsibilities?
One would be just on, just quick thinking about it, it would be our financial returns and growth. We're not statutorily required to grow, but we think that we should, and there are risks to us not being able to.
No, and that's a good answer, but that's because that's just what I'm trying to ascertain. What are you responsible for? What's your orbit of activity? What do we have to do anyhow? And it's just that those two seem a bit mixed.
Yeah, but I think that we'd like to step ahead of our statutory responsibilities and things like public health and safety, biodiversity and nuisance. Our statutory responsibilities on nuisance are quite limited. The requirement by the statutes are not where we want to operate. We want to operate as a much better neighbour than that.
Right. So is that going into the future?
Now, today, we for the last 10 years, we've operated far in excess of the statutory minimum that we have to operate in terms of noise, in terms of emissions, in terms of light pollution, all those things.
Okay.
And we'll continue. We're going to get better at it. That's what we're saying here. So this next set of charts just goes through each of the 6 capitals, and I'm not going to go through them in detail. I just want to point out they are in your report, and you'll find them interesting reading from 37 on. And we encourage you to read the finer print in your own time. So we're going to switch across from the...
Kate.
This looks wonderful, thank you. And the photography is fantastic. The question I've got, I'm on page 54, is the Harbour and Beyond. Sorry, Our Harbour and Beyond. And seeing that title, your role in the harbour is relatively small or confined to your port activities, albeit your effect is, and the expectations of the community right round the harbour are that it's your domain. And seeing the Deputy Mayor of Dunedin post recently about the new, at McKendree Bay, the new, what's the word for it, pontoon, and won't it be great when Port Otago dredges here? I thought, oh, that's interesting. There's an assumption there. You put things like Our Harbour and Beyond, and people are assuming that you're going to be there helping them. And I don't know if that's your expectation or not, but it's that understanding of where your interests are in that harbour.
We certainly are interested in cooperating, even though we might not be responsible and we might not be obligated financially or to do it.
And this may go to the last question about the expectations.
We would, if we can do it at a low cost. We're obviously the only operator. For someone else to come and do it would be hugely expensive. So yes, we do try and find a way to do those things.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's the same for the Boat Harbour, I presume, who had years of angst about that, and those all happened.
And using that example, Kate, I think if the organisation can get a consent, because we don't have a consent to dredge in McKendree Bay or in the Boat Harbour.
Yeah.
So in that instance, the Tuggy Yacht Club obtained the consent and we helped them with the work.
Right.
And that's been a great partnership and we're very proud of what we've done there. And at McKendree Bay, we've made the same offer. And Quarantine Islands the same throughout the harbour. Where there's consent that we can assist, we'll clearly assist. And that's working quite well.
Great. Thank you.
I'm mindful of the time, and I'm not sure how far we are through the presentation.
We're getting well through.
But keep going.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well. Our highs and lows. This shows up on the early pages of our.
You've got to go backwards in your book.
On your book, but Basically, it's just a graphic summary of some of the great things and some of the not so great things that we've been able to achieve in the last financial year. We now have 319 employees, and you'll hear more details in a minute, but our net profit after tax is 50.5 million. We've undertaken 1,044 visual safety leadership discussions, up from 282 the previous year. That is a real effort that we're trying to make to engage everyone in the organisation into safety conversations around what they do, what they think's a risk, what they think we should be doing to improve that risk or to reduce that risk. We've had 88 noise complaints, 71 of which were related to the Rio ships, which now have silencers installed, and that 88 is down from 119 the previous year. Some examples of some community support in the swimming, the swim bags for the and free swimming lessons. We've got a process of identifying 22 critical risks, and we have this bow tie process where we engage the breadth of the organisation that's associated, or the people that are associated with a particular risk, and identify the individual pieces of that risk and try and close the gaps. And we're down to we've closed 16 out of 22 bow tie studies, so we've only got like 6 to go, and we believe we've closed our critical risk gaps. We're down a little bit on our containers from the previous year, not really due to COVID, more due to changes in shipping patterns. We've got Timaru. We were getting about I don't know 20,000 from Timaru that used to come through us and back onto another Maersk vessel, when that Maersk vessel is currently, or was until a few days ago, calling at Timaru to pick those up. It's now coming back for a while to Port Chalmers. We had 12 out of 20 stakeholders telling us we need to prioritise our relationships. Interestingly, that was all around the congestion that the cruise ships make and the difficulty for other customers getting into the port while the cruise ships were there. And that solved itself for the next few years, but we need to find some long-term solutions for that when the cruise business does come back. 112 cruise visits, down 3 on last year, and we lost about 10 because of the banning of the cruise vessels in March. And we've upgraded 90% of our warehouse lighting to LED. We had 11 LTIs, down 3 on last year, and our logs were down from 1.5 million down to 0.89.
LTIs, sorry?
Lost time injuries. So moving on to the financial results. We achieved a near record profit of 50.5 million for the year. And to deliver this healthy result during this year of all years is, I think, a testament to how robust the business is, supported by a very balanced risk base in terms of our portfolio. Revenue from port-related businesses, containers, bulk cargo and cruise, had a challenging year, down 9% on the previous year. While the container business was impacted by COVID-19, it was changes to the Maersk networks, as I said before, and a consequent reduction in transship volumes that had the most significant impact. Bulk cargo volumes of 1.5 million were down on previous year's 1.8 million, mainly due to logs. We were first affected by COVID in China back in February, long before it got to New Zealand. The Chinese stopped taking logs at their ports because they had no truck drivers to move the logs away. And then as soon as they got going again, we shut down our forestry business because of our COVID infections. The anticipated record cruise season, which was going to be 130 some ships, was cut short, and we ended up with 112, 204,000 passengers versus 229,000 the year before. Our financial year result underlined a significant contribution that was made by our property business, the annual revaluation of the investment property portfolio, directly impacted on the company's bottom line, and it added 27.9 million of unrealised gain. And this chart, where are we, compares results to the prior year and also highlights the performance of the key earnings contributors. Okay, looking back a bit further, next slide. You can see the trend in these three contributors, with land development playing a bigger role as the Te Rapa project matures. The balance sheet strength, the balance sheet has never been stronger. Our equity ratio is 84%, and we're well within our bank debt ceiling of $110 million. Return on equity continues to be solid, driven by continued good earnings and substantial revaluation gains in our property portfolio. And our dividends paid to the ORC has been reliable and regular. Kevin will cover our financial outlook later in this presentation, but we can safely say that our expected performance and the strength of a balance sheet, upcoming dividends will continue in this trend. Okay. And moving on to some talk about strategy, Kevin.
Just before you start, a question from Michael.
Can I take you to page 89 of the statement? You've just talked about it here in that summary. And obviously they've changed things since I did UE accounting. But you've managed to put unrealised assets as an income. So if it appreciates in value, you put it down as an income.
Unrealised valuation gain?
Yeah. But you don't pay tax on that, do you? No.
No, but we're obligated as a property business to revalue our...
So I can understand that for the 12 months to, what, the 30th of June this goes, does it?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So are you expecting if that goes the other way and you get a downwriting of your capital assets, would that figure as a loss next year? Would it, and you'd report it as a loss in this balance sheet? Is that correct?
That's correct. If we had 27 million downward revaluation, we would be reporting a loss, a total loss. But it's not a cash loss. It won't affect the dividend stream.
Are you expecting that?
It's the future.
Well, that's why you're director.
We're uncomfortable with these big revaluation gains. We would much rather see more modest, slower revaluation gains, but these are done by independent parties, and they are what they are. The commentators about future property prices do not predict big revaluation losses, but I think the higher you go, the more likely you are to have an adjustment that might impact you.
So I think you're seeing where I'm going to go with my next question, which is, if it does go the other way, if there's a readjustment expected in the market, and that's what I've heard around commercial property, then that's not going to affect your dividends that you pay to us. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
I think, Michael, if you look at the slide up on the screen, if you get to the 31.1 and the 34
stay there.
lines,
That's
the sort of the contribution from the three businesses above before that revaluation gain. So effectively, it's showing our port business is about 11. Investment properties, that's the rent roll and sustainable earnings out of that business. And the developed land sales, you can only sell your land once. So that's on the trajectory of actually getting smaller and smaller each year for us. So that'll eventually drop away because we've only got so much land at Te Rapa Gateway to sell. So you look at the two lines above it, and that's the sort of sustainable earnings of the business.
So are you intending to defer selling some of that property if the market was to appreciate downwards? So would it be an option for you, in other words, to hold on to something that you were previously going to sell?
Well, we always have a view on the property assets of what's the best long-term use for it.
Yeah.
And whether that's a hold and then develop, or whether it's a sell on the market. And that's just a case by case as, you've got your options in front of you. So that's always going to be what's best for the whole of life for the project.
Yeah.
And as I remember, you don't tell us what you expect to happen in 2021 along these lines, do you?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay, cool.
So
Let's keep going. Let's keep going on the last year.
Yep.
Why we're here first, and then we'll move on to projections.
So any other questions on the financials that I can answer? We good with that?
Are we comfortable?
Good.
Cool.
Okay, just a quick sort of update on what we're looking forward with each of the businesses. So Container World strategy is pretty straightforward. It's working with our customers in the Highlanders catchment across Targa Southland and South Canterbury to work with them to make sure they've got the most efficient supply chain. And that's our focus and will continue to be our focus. That drives some investment, so landside investment, typically warehouse and CT type site operations. So where it makes sense to invest in that space to support our customers, we will. And that's always an emerging opportunities that we work with customers over a long period of time, and some of the projects come off and others don't. So that's sort of the background around that. A big investment and focus for us is still to invest and catch up on the digital space. A lot of our shipping lines and some of our partners are investing heavily in systems to make it more automated, seamless, and transparent for the customers. We're playing a bit of catch up in that space, so it's a heavy investment for us at the moment to get better in that area, because we're a conduit, we're a gateway, so it's effectively plumbing us up electronically to our customers and our shippers. Ultimately, so there's a seamless, blockchain is the trendy option, but effectively any systems that support that sort of network. And clearly, we've always got a continued focus on automation, which is around anything from warehousing all the way through to the container terminal. So just looking at small projects to improve our productivity and efficiency where they make sense. So that's just a watching brief for us, important part of our business. We flick onto our bulk business, and the focus is really for us is Dunedin Bulk Port. We've done a lot of work, and you'll read in the book there's a section in our assets about what we've committed to and achieved this year. So we're now at 8.5 metres in the channel, 10 metres in the turning circle, which is a big improvement. It's good for additional volumes for our exporters and our importers, but it's also good for safety and safety improvements for us. We've done that without any, fuss or bother. It's been quietly using our own gear, nice and gently, taking our time, which has been really good for the environment, and I think a really sensible approach. It's taken us about 18 months, 2 years, but now it enables us to consider some options that we didn't have in the past. So clearly we'll be looking to complete the project, which is to get slightly wider, because there's some areas, if you think of the Ravensdown Wharf and out to the side of the rock wall, it's pretty tight there. So over time, we'll widen to give us more wriggle room on the channel, which will improve it. And there's a couple of corners we're going to shape a wee bit coming in and out of the islands, just to make it safer for our pilots.
What's being shaped, the islands?
No, I'd love to shape the islands, but we're not the Harbour Board. No, clearly the islands, it's about 104 metres wide, and we've got a lot of depth here. We've got nearly 38 metres of depth,
I know.
which is really good. But that is an unmovable object for us. So we're dealing with that constraint. But what we can do is make the path through the island straight.
Oh, okay.
And at the moment, the ships actually have to take the turn. So if we widen slightly before it and slightly after.
So the widening is the channel?
Yes.
Okay.
So effectively the ships can steer straight through the islands rather than bend. And that just reduces the risk and gives us more flexibility. Because we do have some constraints around daylight hours and nighttime hours, and so we'll work our way through that. So there's a big focus there. We picked up the ENZA building last December. So that's the blue building there you can see above Leith. So that sort of completes that land acquisition that we needed. We owned the land but not the building. So we're starting to get into a nice position there that the gated port can carry on, and then it'll improve safety and logistics, and it just enables us to turn that into a truly gated port, and that's our focus.
Mr. Chairman, can I just commend them for the safety?
Mary.
Because on my first bike ride, I came off on the lines there. I see the lines now inside your fence.
And I think the cycleway, these things get shipped with the cycleway,
Yes,
which is a very smart thing to do, and it's complementary to what we're doing, so that's very, very good.
I just remarked that a truck driver wanted to help me, but Pete Hodgson said, no, she's getting back on a bike.
Right.
Kevin, within that circle, that area which effectively is the gated
Yes.
area, are you able to operate 24/7, 365 days of the year, essentially, with
Yes, that's
activities?
that's the expectation in the future.
Right.
And it's all heavily industrial and zoned correctly. We've got a bit of work to do to get there, but this is our vision. So I'm talking about our vision, not exactly what's happening tomorrow.
Cool.
Okay, so just a number of steps we've got to work through. So we think that's a nice option. We've got a replacement wharf looming, which is the oil wharf, which is there where it got oil jetty. There's a wharf there that's end of life in 10 years, and the Ravensdown wharf's end of life as well. So those are replacements we're working on, and how we do that. We'll develop that over the next 12 months. So a real focus there. The good thing is it enables us in the future to take logs off Port Chalmers and bring them into town, which means no log trucks on the road, and a better position for our community, a better business for us, and a lower carbon footprint. So it's a good outcome here if we just work our way through this project over time. Okay, so that's our strategy with bulk. Cruise strategy. Our strategy here is to continue to support the industry and engage with them to make sure we get a safe return of cruise to this region. It's important to us. And there's a lot of work going on with Cruise New Zealand, the cruise line, so I'm part of that. So we're advocating strongly. I'd love to see New Zealanders only round New Zealand cruise come back. We're working with government to try and get that up. And we'd hope that might appear next year. It's not happening this year. But our commitment is to maintain our skills. So we are carrying some team that are really good at this. We need to invest in them so we're ready to go when they come back. And we're ready to invest in what we need on the land side. Because it isn't really going to be the ships. The shipping line's going to deal with all the COVID issues. It's going to be what happens on land side. What do we have to do differently? So we've got to be ready to support that. So that's a watching brief, stay engaged and support strategy, okay? Property, our property approach is pretty straightforward. It's optimise our current portfolio to make sure it's right. And we've got a couple of key developments going on, and they're our focus. So Te Rapa Gateway we've talked a lot about. We've 43 hectares. We've got 11 hectares remaining there. Got a little bit of land development, a tiny bit to finish, and we think we'll have that done in 2023, which enables us to stand up buildings and effectively design, build and lease, and then yield for the future, or sell, as Michael pointed out. And we're always making that assessment on those options as they come to the table. So that's a good development we've got. And then we've got Oak Road as a picture there, and that's a container yard in the background, which is about a 6 hectare site that we own. But next door, we've just picked off the first stage of our Oak Road development, which is 2 lovely warehouses. One of them has been leased by Auckland City Council on a long-term lease. The other one's available, 21B is available at the moment. So anyone looking for a 5,000 square metre warehouse in Auckland, come and see me. But effectively, we think we'll get that one away in a relatively short future. Good demand for these sort of warehouse, small distribution centre in light of some of the learnings from COVID. That retail is probably not where you want to be, but distribution centres are pretty good. So our focus is pretty simple at the moment around those options. So you get to our sort of capital expenditure, just to give you a scale of what we do. Nothing's cheap in our game. You have to get used to some big numbers. So you can see down on the bottom left, you've got Oak Road building, that's building A at the front. They're about 15 million investment in a warehouse like that. You've got 6 million above, and that's 600 Arthur Porters in Te Rapa. A hybrid straddle's 2.5 million. A diesel straddle's about 1 million. Tugs are about 12. The new dredges are about 25. Our trusty old New Era's got a few years left in it, we hope. But how long it can run into the future it's got a short lifespan. It's about 25 million to replace that. You can see the bit of wharf there that we built 2 years ago, 18 months ago. It was 21 million for the nice piece of cast eel and that one piece of wharf. Wharfs are expensive in our game. Down the bottom at the $1 million gives you that. That's a good project we've done, which is the ex-Naylor Love site across from the stadium, and that's been extended into a log yard. Had some really bad drainage into the Leaf. We've tidied all of that drainage up. So we're capturing all that it's like tar that comes off the logs when it rains. So that's all been captured and recycled. It's not going into the lead, so I'm pretty proud of that. And there's a whole lot of power lines have been undergrounded rather than above. So that's just made it a safer operation for our log marshallers, which is really cool. $500,000 for a side loader and $15 million for a crane.
Michael.
Do you own any containers or rent? None at all. So
None.
Right.
We do give them to communities, and we have to buy them from the shipping lines damaged. We repair them and make sure they're fit for purpose, and then we sponsor, rowing clubs, community groups. So there's a number of them around town you'll see.
Yes. Okay. And what does a container cost just off?
Sorry?
What does a container cost to buy new?
New?
Yeah.
Reef is probably 30 grand.
Wow.
A dry box might be $5 US.
Yeah.
But reefers are quite expensive.
Thank you.
So just to give you sort of an indicative capital plan, this moves around a wee bit, but we look at it every year. So this year we've got probably a $2 million investment in IT. We've got EV light vehicles and forklifts that they're at a scale that we can invest in the technology now. So working through that at the moment to get some electric vehicles on the port, which will be good if they add to the two we've already got. Tauroni Beach, you know about, it's been ongoing for 10 years. We've got a hearing, I think it's with you guys on the 7th of December. So looking forward to getting through that process and then getting out the other side, hopefully with a green light, so we can build that beach for the community. It'll be a great project. Looking forward to that next year. You can see a number of blues there, which are growth, which is a few sheds that we're working on with customers and projects that are in the wings. Some of those will get delivered and others won't. So that's still indicative. And then you've effectively got our new office, which we put on hold last year just due to COVID. Up the top there, looking out a bit further, 2023-24, our straddle fleet upgrade. We'd like to be able to let the technology just get a little bit better and then switch the fleet out for a completely efficient fleet in one go. And we think...
Mary.
Sorry, the new office build that you've got there, did you, as a result of COVID, did you find people working differently, or is the port different?
That's a good question. We learned a few things in COVID.
Yeah.
And the office that we need will not be the one we designed pre-COVID. So our footprint will be slightly smaller because, like our IT team, for example, they'll work from home all the way through COVID. And now there's this sort of flexibility around where they can work and how many desks we need. So we've got a bit of flexibility we'll sustain into the future. But we're mainly an operational business that's based on port.
Yeah.
So that requirement to be there and present is unchanged. Now, amenities might change a little bit in how we design things to get a bit of separation, just for the future. So we've learned a few things that will feed into our new project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, what's the SIB?
Stay in business CapEx. So just stuff you just got to do to maintain the current revenue stream. We've considered to be stay in business. And then sustainability, there are initiatives that you're doing to lower your carbon footprint. And growth is to support investment where our customers want growth. Is a simple way to think of it. Cool.
Can I just say that I like the way you've done that. Like one of my questions was going to be, what are you doing in terms of growth? Because I see on one of the pages the three most important things for the shareholder financial returns, growth and workforce safety. But there, you've outlined it. I actually like your whole document and I hope it keeps evolving. And there's some good stuff. Thank you, and thank you for your work.
Just touching on the Ravens, and you can see there with that Ravensdown oil replacement project, that's highly likely not speculative. So, and 20 million is just indicative. By the time we work through the final designs and what we do, that's the sort of money we're having to spend there. And the new era, we hope that lasted to 26. So we've got that penciled in out there. So just to give you, that's a pretty good view of where we're thinking into the future. Question?
Any queries here? All good?
Good.
Okay.
Okay, quick look ahead. No numbers, but directions. The full impact of COVID-19 on our supply chains is still being sort of figured out. I think the biggest impact of COVID-19 will be on export demand from offshore rather than any supply chain issues onshore, and that if there is a global recession coming out of this whole thing, then export volumes are likely to decline a bit, which will impact us. As Kevin said, we're working with Cruise New Zealand to support the safe return of cruise ships, but we're not expecting any cruise ships in this current financial year. We're focusing on efficiencies. We've lowered our cost base quite considerably since the change in some of our container shipping lines network schedule, and we'll continue to do that. And we've talked also about getting rid of overdue outstanding leave that had been sitting as a liability on our balance sheet, and we're well through that process, and we're going to keep it that way. When we get that liability down, we're going to keep it down. And Kevin mentioned investing in technology to reduce costs is also a focus on efficiencies. Our property business on a cash basis, Michael, will continue to contribute increased contribution to our total business. What happens to the valuation of our property on our balance sheet is unknown, and we're not going to make any estimates of what it might be, but it will not impact our cash flows in the long run. We're expecting lower group earnings in the 2021 year before revaluations. We don't know what revaluations are going to do. We have a strong financial base to withstand impacts. We've got loads of headroom in our borrowing facilities, and we have an equity ratio of 84%, which by competitive standards is a very healthy figure, very, very healthy figure. So that's the year ahead. Again, I said earlier, there's no reason why the dividend trend or the dividend indications for 2019-20 will be unchanged to 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is this all in here?
It's all in the book.
Didn't it all seem to be in the book in the way you're doing it?
Pretty much.
Yep. Those slides didn't seem to directly be in the book, are they?
Is that slide in the book?
No. Everything.
Yes, but those slides are in our diligent.
Do we have our outlook? Any commentary about our outlook for 21 in
Yes,
the
the chairman's report.
Okay, yeah.
It's all there.
So, are you saying everything you've gone over today is in this book? It didn't seem to be.
Apart from my strategy update I've just given you.
Okay, so are they all in our... Have we got them electronically? Could we have those slides today electronically or whatever?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
And are they deemed confidential at this point?
It's a public meeting.
Public meeting, so yeah.
Okay. No, well, just so we know that whatever you're sharing is...
Yes.
Yep. No,
And if you prefer to have this electronically, we can do that too.
No, I just
Happy with that? Bedside.
I just didn't look, it didn't seem everything there was here in the same, all the figures I think were, but not in the same configuration.
Scott, Gary, then Kevin.
Look, thanks, gentlemen. Really positive, great document, really positive outlook going forward, given the circumstances that you find yourselves and everybody, I guess, finds themselves in. My question is around the Hamilton development and how land sales do factor quite a reasonable percentage of revenue. And as that drops off and that completes over whatever number of years that will be, is your property division looking at similar type developments that you would then continue on with to maintain that type of revenue, or will that be the be all and end all and you'll more consolidate to business as usual around existing investments?
We would be opportunist about those sorts of projects as they emerge. There could be some in our future. We haven't identified any. We haven't got anything in the planning stages or in the investigation stages at the moment. The next big step for our property business is that 6 hectares in Auckland, and being such a high yield part of the country in terms of property, we want to make sure that we invest heavily to get the best yield that we possibly can. So we've got some changes to make in terms of acquiring slightly more property to get to that 6 hectares, and making some use changes to some of the big pieces. But we've got a vision for what an industrial park might look like over there in Wiri, and that's going to be the next big focus after Te Rapa.
Thank you.
And anything else will be opportunistic.
Kevin.
You're probably just adding that, Gary, is we already have about 13.5 million rental income that's coming through your property section. Anyway, is that sort of...
It's the actual rent roll is more than, it's about 17 million, isn't it?
17, was it?
Yeah, and then there's a few
13,
expenses and things, yeah. That's earnings, that 30 million is earnings rather than total receipts.
Right, yeah. So, look, that's a superb document, and look, thanks very much for taking on board what we've talked about, being socially responsible and getting on with everyone. And it's really great to see that you're focusing on what your customer base is looking for and what they see as important steps for you to take going forward. So I think that augurs very well for the port. And it's great to see what you've got planned capital-wise for the future, which are some pretty hefty numbers. But when we look at your balance sheet and the asset the value of the asset that we have, it's very sound investment by the look of it. So, and that just sort of reflects on what the board's done and what management have done in the past to create something that's very, very strong on all that big spending you did earlier on. So, thanks very much for the report, and keep that dividend rolling in. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
I just checked with both Michael and Carmen. Any questions, Michael or Carmen?
No, Andrew, thank you. Port team, I'm sorry I'm not with you. I've been impressed by your presentation. I'm looking forward to getting a copy of the report. It sounds like it's a very impressive document. Thank you for being open and forward-looking with us. I've enjoyed the whole presentation. I just wish I was there, but I'm a bit disabled at the moment.
Thank you. Carmen?
Thank you very much, and I too send my sincere apologies, and I look forward to reading the report, which I can hear shuffling in the background and I thank you for your honesty, and we always wish you well, Port Otago. We like when you come to visit, and we appreciate your honesty. Sometimes people might see as intrusion of the questions we ask, but we appreciate the fact that you are so forward-thinking and are honest with your answers. So thank you once again.
Thanks, Carmen. Marion?
I just want to thank you from the neighbourhood, okay? That work you did on the Rio ships was actually quite outstanding, because you negotiated with people when other people in the country didn't have that problem. So can I thank you? I've had much quieter nights.
Only 80 of the 88 complaints came from Marion.
So, it was really appreciated. I mean, the fact that what you did the other day, we were laughing at the beginning, but you did that so fast, and that when you turned I could see another, because when people talk about terrorism, they don't know that there is a watch person sitting up watching every ship coming in and out of that port. And
the main terrorist.
No terrorist gets it. And so on that question, I could see the other boat going out, and then you reversed it. But then you explained it to people, so thank you. You treat people as though they're intelligent, and it's appreciated.
Awesome. Hey, well, look, on behalf of us all, thank you very much. I think it's quite a bold move that you've stepped out and surveyed your external customers and stakeholders, and so good on you for doing that. I know it sounds like it's industry best practice now, but good on you for doing that. It's probably a pretty solid performance, look, the 1920 year, and just on the position that the port are in financially with a strong balance sheet, I think it is a reflection on some pretty sound, prudent management in the past. So when these unusual years arise, from time to time, companies can, cope and keep their head above water. So you're certainly in that category. So we're very pleased that you've got a strong balance sheet. And as Kevin says, well done with the dividends. And we look forward to our relationship blossoming in the future in that space. So thank you all.
Your worship. Not worship, you're not worshipping here. We don't do that here. Sorry, it's just.
Can you withdraw that comment?
No, I withdraw, Mr. No One. Sorry. I think that seeing the ODT and its breaking news, it would be very nice if we add an item of congratulations to our agenda. Is it too late to do that?
No, absolutely. If you'd like to move in that way.
I think it would be nice to congratulate the new CEO of Dunedin City Council and her new appointment.
Yes, I'll second that.
Well said. And it's
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tank.
excellent.
Thank you.
It's great news. It's great news for the city.
And for the continuity.
Absolutely. Yep. So moved and seconded. You've got that, Liz? Yep. So moved by Kate, seconded by Hillary.
She may feel conflicted in taking that note, but that's okay.
I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
I hope not.
Okay, we're still live on YouTube and we're still on task in terms of we're on item 6, which is the confirmation of minutes from the 26th of August, and we'll deal with the 26th of August first. Moved by Kate, seconded by Gary. We've got everyone's attention.
Yeah, sorry. All those in favour?
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We also need a mover for the 10th of September, that they're true and correct, or true and accurate.
Yep.
Also moved by Kate, seconded by Alexa. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Moving on to the action list, which is on page 15. Is that they're all either, apart from the first item, are all either items that are completed or in progress. And just remind me, Sarah, with the first item with regards to the discussions for potential consideration by the forum, were we going to review that further down the track? I just can't recall. Amanda may be able to help us.
Yeah, I need to have a chat with you, I think, separately about how it comes back to the council.
Okay,
table.
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you. Any queries, questions with
So
regards to?
what are we doing with that? Sorry?
We're going to, obviously, we need to have a discussion. We'll report to the next council meeting on where that's at and where it's heading.
So could that reappear as an action for next council meeting?
Correct. Yes. Yep. Any other queries or questions? If not, moving on. Moving on to item 8, which is the chairperson's report and CE's report. They've both been obviously circulated and read. We're happy to take any questions if you wish. Marion.
It's off your reports.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. It's about the Manihirakia Catchment Exemplar Project.
Yes.
And there's that's 4 million, isn't it, that's coming in there. The details of the ORC role yet to be fully defined.
Yep.
I've got a small problem.
Yep.
This is about cleaning up the river, correct? We've had a number of people, some around this table, but some from that catchment saying there's nothing wrong with that river. So if you've got people saying there's nothing wrong with the river and you're asking them to clean it up, do you see what I mean? There's going to have to be some change of language or some change of attitude. I'm sorry, it's quite a rough question I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, put it this way. We're in a position, you could say it's a fortunate position where the Minister for the Environment has considered there are 3 catchments worth investing a significant amount of money, taxpayer money, in these areas to make some improvements because they deem them to be perhaps at the the poorer end of the scale with Kaipara and Pelorus. So I hear what you're saying, but I'd probably suggest that there is already work happening in there in that catchment because of poor water quality in certain areas. There are some hot spots that we're aware of. There is, the majority of the river is probably in, good shape. You could probably say good shape. So I think there's a acceptance that there's some work to be done.
I need to have trust, love. I need to have trust that the people who've said there's nothing wrong with water quality can be trusted to spend money wisely to improve water quality.
Yeah.
And you see the contradiction.
Can we ask if anyone around this table who was in that category?
Well, no. Before we go any further, all I wanted to say was that remember this funding as essentially going to have a governance structure which separates it out from the control of the Otago Regional Council to a certain degree, although we are going to be partnering in the project, clearly. So you could argue that this funding, we do not have a direct, we haven't got a direct ability to influence if it gets spent or applied for or whatever. There's a separate entity, governance entity, that's going to drive that.
And and that's to the point. Are there members of that governance group going to be some of the people who said they didn't believe there was a problem?
Don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know is that, and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is or Sarah, or Gwyneth, okay, Gwyneth, you.
My understanding is that governance group hasn't been set up yet. We haven't even necessarily identified who would be on that governance group, but there is an expectation that ORC would be a member of that governance group.
Thank you.
You can hear my problem.
Yep. I think we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, I hear your problem. I've heard those same stories. Nothing wrong with that river.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, I think it's a very disappointing generalisation.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a debate about what.
I'm just laying down a benchmark.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But I think, but I think our council has a position that I would suggest aligns pretty much with the thinking around there are some issues that need to be dealt with about water quality in the Menehira Care. It's not the whole river, but there are some hot spots, and I think it doesn't matter who you talk to, you'd probably get an agreement on that. I think that's probably fair. Brian, sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to build this debate up further, but simply make the point that that's why it's important. And Mr. Chair, I challenge your comment that maybe it's not the ORC's responsibility anyway.
No, hang on. I did not say it's not I'm talking about that fund.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we have not got 100% control over the fund because there's a governance structure that will be charged with securing the funding. That's what I said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I apologise then. But my point quite simply is that's why it's really important that this organisation has good science. So it's not about, subjectively, we think, there's good water quality, we think there's bad water quality. It's really important that this organisation front foots it in terms of its science and that there's some transparency about cause and effect. Now, yes, there's hot spots, but for example, for years there's discussions, what's the contribution of the wastewater plant? What's the contribution of the dairy farms? What's the contribution? Who's doing what? And that's really, we need to get, that needs to be a transparent story. So it's an objective story, not a subjective one. And we need to be supportive and we need to get on with it.
Yep, fair comment.
Thank you.
Okay, any other queries? If not, moving on to...
I'd just like to make a week on that. From the Menehira Care Reference Group, there is... through you, Mr. Chair, is that still happening, Mr. Neil, the motion from the group that the Minister be informed of what is happening with that group, what actions they've been taking and their willingness and want to be part of that governance to ensure that all the good work that they are doing, and that's from Central Otago Environmental Society, Fish and Game,
Thank you.
It'll be interesting to see what he comes back as a response to that letter.
Thank you, Kevin. Gary.
You met with the Albert Town Community Association.
Oh, yes.
What was the outcome there?
So that was the discussion with rabbits, and so Richard Lord had actually already met with the chair of that association the week or 10 days before. So Richard already had been in to see the extent of the rabbit problem. So the outcome essentially was it was already in staff hands and they were following it up. So I'm not sure what's happened since then, but it had already been triggered by an inspection by Richard. Yep.
Would it be possible to have that come back to us, one of our committees, or whatever the appropriate committee is?
I can probably just get Gavin to flick an email around to just update us where it's at, whether they're taking an approach a bit like the Clyde scenario with the golf club, hospital, etc. But I can just get Gavin to.
Can I just elaborate on that just a little bit? Because I think the issue is we've got a policy, and what's been highlighted by these local communities is that they believe that there has been a lack of action from a variety of authorities, including ourselves. Now, the question is that right? Have the modified McLean scale, for example, in Albert Town, been beyond what our policy is? And the question is, has it? I don't understand the screwed up faces.
No. There's no screwed up faces. Can I just make a comment first?
Yeah.
So, with regards to Albert Town, I'm going to ask Gavin to update us where that particular inspection process is at and what the plan is. The second thing is that we have had the odd discussion about the pest management plan around this table, which was adopted around about 12 months ago, and then we had an ops plan that was adopted before the end of this last financial year. So it kicked in on the 1st of July. So all I'm trying to say is that, to get to your point about McLean Scale 3 and rabbit control, etc., and beyond, is that the pest plan is really only still being bedded in with the ops plan as well. So to get an assessment of how things are tracking, what I suggest is we need some more time, and I acknowledge that things are not going to change overnight, and if there are non-compliance situations out there with regards to rabbits, I would expect staff to be dealing with those situations because they have the tools in the toolbox to be able to do that now. But
do they? Okay. I mean, then that's the question that I'm asking, you see. In this particular case, are you listening to this, Gavin?
Yep. He's going to respond.
In this particular case, Albert Town community have said, we've got a problem. We've got rabbits out of control. Now, that would a claim like that would suggest that the modified McLean scale of rabbits is well beyond 3. I don't know if that's right. That's the claim. What's the assessment? If that is true, then the question is, why do we need community groups to alert us to this? Why aren't we actually being alerted to this by our own internal mechanisms and then taking that action? So that's the question, essentially. Are the claims correct? It's received a lot of public attention. you've now referred to it in your report? B, if they are, what's the nature of the problem? C, is there an error or a deficiency of our own in that? If so, and what would a satisfactory outcome be? So I think those are reasonable questions.
I don't want to relitigate the RPS, etc. But what I would like to hear is where things are at with regards to the Albert Town situation. Are you able to help us, Gavin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. All of those questions will be answered in the microphone's not working.
Okay.
All of those questions will be answered in the paper we're bringing to committee next month.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Any other queries with regards to either report? Alexa, and then Brian, then Kate.
I've got two on Sarah's report, on your report, thank you. First, the discussion with Environment South and Environment Canterbury on collaborative approach to NPS water. I just wondered if there was any further detail on that.
So
I've got one more question.
We're still in very early stages of discussion. We've had some chief executive discussion, and we've just introduced the staff to each other in terms of thinking about what we might be able to collaborate on. Some looking into data hosting and sharing is one thing, but it's a conversation that's yet to mature.
Okay, so you're basically looking at ways that you can work together and find efficiencies and things.
Yes, we are, because obviously there's a significant demand for resources with the new freshwater NPS, and so if there are opportunities to work together and perhaps work in different ways, then we're open to that.
Excellent. The other one was wondering what the with Councillor Noonan and Councillor Calvert, what the transport matters was about.
That was in relation to transport complaints, particularly, and the complaints process.
Around buses, or?
Yes.
Around buses. Oh, good. Is there any outcome that you can perhaps enlighten us with? Because I think face a few of those.
Yes, we do, and I think the conversation was around the fact that we accept that the complaints process perhaps hasn't been as clear or as quick as it should have been, and Dr. Palmer's doing some work now with the transport team to make sure that we have a process that is consistent, and that means that people get answers quickly. As we've discussed before, we have some difficulties because we don't have a CRM, we don't have a complaint logging system, and that makes it difficult. Complaints come in and others aren't aware of them, then they can sometimes not get dealt with as promptly as they should. So it was really around process and what we can do to improve that.
I'd love to stay up to date with that. I think Kate probably would too, but I get quite a lot. Well, you would have seen some come through from me. I get quite a lot of them.
So I think the main thing is, please, if you get complaints about public transport, they need to go to Gavin, and he will deal with them from there.
Thanks.
And the loop will be completed?
Yes, the loop will be completed, which is the process that we've worked through with Councillor Calvert recently.
Thank you, Sarah. Just before I go to Marion, I just can't remember Kate or Brian, and then Kate, and I think Kate was moving.
I was going to move.
Okay, Brian.
24th September, yourself, Councillor Kelleher and staff met regarding the Arrow Cadrona. Were there any outcomes from that meeting or any changes, or?
No, nothing significant. We really just talked about reliability issues, didn't we, more than anything, and that staff are going to be coming back to council to further discuss the Arrow Cadrona.
Great, thank you.
Marion.
It's given that we did that QLDC spatial plan meeting, I see you met with a person from Christchurch International Airport.
Yes, I did.
Was it about Terrace?
Yes, it was.
As well, thank you.
Michael.
Well, actually, a bit closer to home, on page 21, section 5, Richard and I met with the Otago Otago Museum and discussed possibility of working together, and then the kicker, and the museum's funding arrangements.
Yes.
I'm assuming that the museum wanted to talk to us because they want money from us.
No.
They don't want money from us.
No, that wasn't the conversation. It was purely a discussion about the museum and the nature of the museum being that it's the Otago Museum, it's not the Dunedin Museum. They explained to us the history, the Act of Parliament under which it's created and how it is funded. There wasn't any request for funding from us at all. In fact, the greater part of the conversation was in regards to how we might work together, particularly because they have a significant and talented science communication team, and that is something that at times we could perhaps access for assistance.
All good. Kate is moving both reports to be received.
Just whenever it suits you.
Yep. Seconded by Alexa. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put both those motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you all. Moving on to item 9. This is the Port Otago Constitution. And obviously we've had a chance to reflect on the not only what the written material, but the presentation today has given us a bit more background, but however we're dealing with the Constitution right now. The draft Constitution was considered by the Finance on the 26th of August with the committee in agreement with the document. Clarification was asked about the requirement of 3 directors to be New Zealand residents, and this has been removed from the document and included in the recruitment and appointment policy. Nick, we're in your hands, and I suppose the only other thing I would say is that paragraphs 5 to 9 have alluded to the requirements or the what we agreed to do internally, and we've obviously dealt with those requirements through the Governance, Comms and Engagement Committee. We're in your hands.
Yeah, I mean, you've summed it up quite nicely. We've had a few iterations at this, and each time there was a few questions, and we've gone away and looked at things that may or may not have needed to change. The meeting, the governance and engagement meeting that was a few weeks ago, we had the recruitment policy for governance, and that had the guidelines for the port in there. So that's included a couple of things that aren't included in the Constitution itself, which is guidelines around maximum term and around residency. So it leaves the Constitution as not having that level of detail, but it still gives council the control. The key thing is, as we've noted, council still retains the right or the ability to appoint or remove a director at any time. So that's unchanged. So overall, I think the Constitution now, as we've gone through it, it's addressed the issues that council had raised earlier in the year. I think it's a good document that allows the port and council to move forward without hamstringing either party in the event that things occur. The only thing, assuming then, so this is being put up to get council's approval. And then usually constitutions just are filed with the Companies Office. There is another step that it does require approval from the Minister of Transport. That's in the Port Companies Act.
Good.
But the idea here is that hopefully council's at the point that they're comfortable with it and council can approve it, and then we'll just go through the formality of getting the Minister to approve it, and it can be filed and in place.
Yep, so the 3 recommendations cover all or particularly that third one, that your last comment, covers off everything, all the steps along the way. Thank you. Questions, Michael Laws, then
Can I
Kevin.
ask, when you talk about the recruitment and appointment policy brackets governance, whose recruitment and appointment policy is that?
Ours.
That's council's that came to the what's the Governance, Communications and Engagement Committee a couple of weeks ago.
No, so I'm just clarifying. So that's our recruitment policy.
It's for the governance. It's for when you, as the governors, do recruitment of port directors, the independent member and the chief executive primarily.
So does that mean that the A and B, 7A and B, which relates to maximum term and residency, they now become part of that policy?
Yes, they're included in that policy rather than in the Constitution itself.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just wanted to. Thank you.
Kevin.
Look, I think we've been through a very good process, and it just showed that the port is actually listening to what the governors are saying, which has been very good, and I'll be comfortable to move all 3 resolutions, all recommendations.
Thank you. Seconded by Marion. Any discussion? If not, I'll put those 3 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. Carried. Thank you very much, Nick. You might be staying in the chair. So moving on to 9.2, adoption of the annual report.
Can I ask us how we proceed on this? Because I presume this is all written and all ready to go. We can't actually amend it, can we?
Correct.
Right. If I want to make, there may be questions I want to ask which are clarification, maybe a comment I might want to make.
Yeah. So it was considered at audit and risk on the 23rd of a week ago, actually, and the subcommittee endorsed the draft report and financial statement. Okay, so it's been through a level of governance scrutiny, but obviously
questions were asked.
Questions were asked. Yeah.
Okay. Could I make a okay?
Okay, so we'll go to questions, Marion, and then I'll go Kevin, then Hilary, maybe, and Brian.
It's really on page 49 of 195 or page 6 of the report. It's when we talk about how we dealt with all the issues to do with water and the plans. And the fact that there was no mention of the attempt to renegotiate, no mention of the letter, I just want to say to you, it reads really like a history written by a totalitarian state.
Sorry, Marion, I'll just go back to the page you're on, sorry.
It's the message from our chair and chief executive, and apologies to you both, because I don't think it's nasty, but it does read like a history written by a totalitarian state, because it kind of skates over what I would regard as a fairly exhausting period of time.
So maybe I could help.
What page is that?
We're on page
49.
5. Paragraph on page 49.
So with the help of the comms team, this is largely overseen by me. And I guess the key part of it was because the narrative around the year is really important from an audit point of view. And you might, no, I'm sorry, you wouldn't recall, for those of you who weren't here, but the year before, the narrative, this particular introduction to the annual report created some issues with having the audit approved, and so we have to write it in a very specific way. That's not to say that there was any intention on my part to minimise or hide anything. It's just meant to be sort of a chronology, I suppose, of the year, and in particular why we had some departures from what was planned.
I really wanted to make that comment.
Okay, thank you.
It feels like being written out. I could be Trotsky.
Okay.
Well, no, you couldn't.
No, thank you. No, you're coming. You're on the list.
Thank you.
Brian?
Actually, I don't have any questions. I was going to say a statement. Is that later?
Yeah, when we've got a mover and a seconder, we'll go back to you then. Yeah. Hilary?
No, I'll move it or second it.
Okay, you're happy to move? Seconded, Kate? Okay. So we're speaking to the motion now?
No, I'm just going to ask a question first.
Okay, question.
And then I'll have
good as gold.
correct later.
So, question, Michael?
We did change our chairperson during this period.
That's written up. Later.
I'm not sure. Hang on.
Didn't actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, not before the 30th of June.
No.
You're right. It was July. And that was what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. Can I?
Yeah, sure. Go for your life.
Are you happy for me to share this with the team, Marion?
Yeah.
The conversation that you and I had prior to a draft chair and CEO's statement was made. So Mary and I had a conversation because I was unsure whether I should be involved in any way, shape or form, because I'd only been in the role post the 1920 year for 8 days, and this popped up fairly early in July, and so Mary and I had a conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marion, but you indicated that you weren't keen to have a sign off. That's my understanding.
Sign off
of the
would be inappropriate.
The message at the front of the 1920 annual report.
Would be inappropriate.
That's your exact words, yeah. So just for clarity, that's why my name is there. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
That's
Let's clarify that question.
Okay. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. So we're speaking to the motion, Brian.
I just wanted to say a couple of things, if that's okay. The first is that, hey, it has been an eventful year. Water quality and quantity plan changes. At one point, there was a split council, redoing our RPS. We've had COVID, and out of all that, I'm hoping and expecting, nevertheless, sort of making some positive progress. So a big thank you to staff and councillors, I suspect, for hanging in there, and also, dare I say it, I'm quietly thankful for some of the NPSs that are coming out of central government as well. I would like to refer, if I can, because often we skim over these things, and I apologise that this is more of a micro comment than a macro comment that's been discussed before, but I would like to refer to page 62. In terms of water quality, because we just skim over this so often, but we've actually been presented with an interesting graph, page 62, and this is about, rivers water quality, and we make so many comments in terms of water quality of rivers and so forth, and on it, the percentages basically haven't really changed a lot in magnitude in the last 6 years, but there's been a story to be told certainly since then. And of course, it's a little bit hard to compare year to year in terms of rivers water quality because we've increased the number of state of the environment sites. But I do make the point that since last year, that 19 sites have in fact improved by 1 grade and 1 site has improved by 2 grades. Just to get some clarity on this conversation. But to balance that, in fact, 10 sites have degraded by a grade and 1 site, the Kaikra, dare I say it, an urban stream, is degraded by 2 grades. And I personally think that's appalling and we need to address that. But in summary, 2/3 of our rivers are either good or excellent water quality, but 1/3 of the sites, I should say, remain fair or poor. So there's obviously a hell of a lot of work to do. And I look forward to some of the initiatives that are occurring at the moment, some of the central government COVID funding, the new catchment group entity. I'm hoping that we as an organisation become more fit for purpose, because in this plan, there are still a lot of red dots, for example, in regulatory, and I actually applaud staff for their honesty, and so we just need to get on with doing things better. I look forward to the FMU process. Apologies that I've focused on just one narrow topic, but it's good to have some transparency in the story, and I think that story's right throughout this report on different things, so thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers? Gary, then Hilary, then Marion.
So just questions.
Yeah, I think overall it is portraying a pretty positive position, especially on water quality. And we focus so much on the negatives, but actually the positives are out there, and we are working on those that are in need of improving. So, I think there's certainly, as highlighted before, differences around the table about, and it's all perception, I'm afraid. The facts and the detail and the science is moving us forward, and those sites are improving. There is one little minor comment that I think is, we all suffered the effects of what happened with COVID, but we make the comment on page 31 around council functioning and how meetings were able to be held by video conference and Zoom was successfully used. And I would argue that through that period, Zoom for me was hopeless. I know Councillor Laws had problems as well, and I'm pretty certain other councillors did too. So I think in that period, even though we're saying it was enable meetings and everything happened as business as usual, I think that was a very challenging time, and I would say council didn't function as well. That's just one comment I would make there. Otherwise, I think it's a good report.
Okay, thank you. Hilary, then Marion, then Alexa.
If Marion's got questions, let's have the questions before
Okay,
them.
sorry. Marion.
Okay, dear, it's on page 83. There's this thing about contaminated sites. And we've had this discussion in here before about that we obviously have the list of contaminated sites normally held by, oh, I'm going to forget the name of the organisation who ran Hasno. But I'm very conscious of what happened over on the West Coast when suddenly a landfill at Fox River, was it Fox River?
Yes.
Blew open. Do you see what I mean?
Fox Glacier now.
And I don't know if that was ever on a list of Westland's contaminated sites. I really want to ask you, how confident are you that we have a comprehensive list of contaminated sites?
Well, I think it's about the process by which sites go on the list.
Okay.
That is the challenge. So things that are historically known should be on the list. There's always the chance that there is a site that has perhaps not had any use for some time.
Sheep dips,
etc.
Fruit orchard poisoning.
And land use change might bring those up.
Yep.
But in terms of landfills and other things, I wouldn't say, categorically 100% we've got every single landfill, but I know, for example, that when the West Coast situation came about, we did have a close look at our list and at the sorts of issues we may have.
Thank you, love. Page 142, you refer to a building reserve, and are we still going to keep this reserve for a building?
That could probably be started.
Nick?
We'll have that discussion as part of the LTP.
Thank you.
Obviously, this is the position as at 30 June, but that's something that we need to have a look at, what our building requirements are going to be, and then that'll determine what we need in a building reserve or not.
That's great.
Just before we go to Hilary, are there any more questions?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Hilary.
No.
Michael.
I looked at it too. See, unfortunately, I get my copy in black and white, but I questioned it, and thank you, Brian, for asking the question to do with the graph on it's page 19 of the annual report, and Brian's talked about, look, aren't we doing really well on river quality?
No, I never said that.
All right, where's that effect?
Trending.
Look at lakes underneath it.
Yes. Oh, right.
And
which Dunstan isn't there?
Well, and it worries me, Marion, because I'm looking at 63 in 2010 and 38 in 2015. And I'm asking, what's happened to produce that kind of change? I then look back at the report and it says changes and trends are analysed once every 5 years and was not scheduled in the 2019-20 year. Water quality trend results are presented in the graphs below. And I assume these are the graphs. Is that right?
I believe so.
Yes.
So, just if you just give Gwyneth a chance.
I believe these are the graphs, yep.
Are those the graphs related to, it's page 17, Gwyneth, comments on target, performance against levels of service targets?
That's the page before. Yeah, the page on. Sorry.
Because that is an extraordinary graph. And I guess the point...
It's the graph on lakes water quality you're referring to, eh?
Yeah.
What page is it on?
It's page 19, Gary, of the report. It's the second graph, and it relates to lake water quality.
Yeah, I think it's more about, it's not so much about the lakes, it's more about the data.
It's the number of lakes you're
But
measuring.
Let's all get on the same page for starters.
yeah, page of our agenda.
82,
What is it?
82, 195.
Thank you.
82.
62, isn't it?
Oh, 62. Oh, your
You
eyesight.
need some glasses.
No.
That's right. It's 62.
Have to look properly.
Maybe if you ask, what's the question?
Okay,
There's a graph.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Just a graph.
Or there's something really weird going on. Can I just take you to it? Why in 2014-19 would the lakes be regarded, 38% of them, as having poor water quality? And then that drops in 2015-20 to 13%.
Well, they've improved in water quality.
Yeah, sure they have.
Yeah.
That's nonsense. You're not going to get 38 to 13% improvement in water quality in a year. And exactly, it's all over the show. And the reason that is all over the show, this graph. And the reason I'm asking it is I'm asking, have the methodology changed, Gavin, by which we do these measurements?
I think the answer is yes.
We're going to go to Gwyneth in a moment, but that fundamentally your question, Michael?
Yep.
It's around the methodology and whether we're doing something differently
And
as
the number of
compared.
lakes, please.
Explain the graph.
Gwyneth, have you sort of got a handle on the question?
So I'm hearing a few things, but I think we're going to have to come back. I don't believe the methodology has changed, but it's probably more related to things like number of samples taken, climatic events, a whole lot of things. So, but I think what we'll do, if I'm just so I can get clear what you want about it, you want an explanation of the drop and the variability from year to year.
If one was to look at that, you would get everything from alarm to, oh my God, this has just gone crazy.
That looks counterintuitive.
And we're publishing out as an annual document, people refer to it. I'd really like to get a lot of clarification around it.
Okay, that's clear. Any further questions?
Water is.
If not, we'll go back to Hilary, then Alexa, and then Kevin. Speaking to the motion.
Yes.
Okay, Hilary.
We have been over these documents and we asked some of that around that question too at Audit and Risk. But I'd like to focus on what the auditors had to say because I thought that was quite interesting. The auditors were very impressed with our new documents and said that these telling the story performance sort of discussions in particular, I think they were impressed by. The only criticisms they had were less than minor, you'd say, in a general. In the sense that, for example, they said that we had more sick leave owing than perhaps might be wise, and that was during COVID. And of course we do. And when I did ask them what amount they would think was an okay amount, they didn't have any answers. So clearly it wasn't a huge problem. It was just something they look at in their official things to look at and came up with a...
It was annual leave, not...
Annual leave, sorry, not sick leave. But there's two things that I'd like to draw to your attention. One of them is that they were pleased about how we were better reporting on what we'd been doing, and that the document was a much better version than the previous ones, and that they had very little to say in it, in an audit sense that was concerning. They did mention Port Otago, and as in who quite knows what it's worth, hard to tell at the moment. We also had some discussions around the performance measures which we are working on. People are, as we speak, the ones who aren't here, I'm sure, are working on them almost as we speak, but that they had some deficiencies in them and we can do better in the long-term plan than we have had, partly that they don't adequately capture the targets we would like to be aiming for, and partly that they are not not very measurable in some senses. So it was a very positive report, I thought, from the auditors. And that speaks to very good work by our Nick's team, I guess, or Sarah's big team, but Nick's team and the others, because lots of things feed into that report. All parts of the organisation feed into that report. So I guess I'd like to say good on everybody for producing the sort of result that has pleased the auditors, insofar as pleased is a word that you relate to auditors, and that while there's work to be done, it's work that is currently underway and is actually moving into the future. So I'd like to commend it to the council.
Thank you. We've got Alexa, Kate, then Michael, Dika.
I think the report itself is really, really good. It follows through. It's really easy to get your head around. It's apart from that same rivers one that I had a problem, the lakes graph, I had a problem with that. But what does concern me about the report is actually the content of it and how many red dots there are and how much work we've got to do. And I just want it to be on record that what I feel this is a wonderful, honest, good look at where we are. Some of the targets seem to me a little bit ridiculous, and things around where we're meeting, in pest quality, for example, and pest management. And in fact, we're a horrible mess, but actually we're probably reaching some targets, although there's a lot that we're not. I was very worried about fresh water, that the fresh water that's been poor, 15% I think it was, or 13%, something around that, and of poor quality water. It hasn't lifted since 2014. We have not been able to lift those poor quality areas into better quality. Lakes one, I just don't think that graph makes sense, but somebody will look at that. So really, really good document, thank you, but let's not lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of work to be done and some things in there that are quite disappointing. But the document's good.
Thank you. Kate.
Thank you. I wanted to also acknowledge and happily shadow or add to the motion an acknowledgement with gratitude to the staff for the report, both on its nature and reporting style, but also for the hard work, because given COVID, these things have rather concertinaed their work program. So, and please pass it on to the team, Nick. So if the mover is happy for that to be added.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd also, none of us came on, I think, this new term because the job was going to be easy, and I acknowledge the reporting lines, but they are what was, and they reflect the past. And I think the excitement and the energy that this new council has is that we know that things have to change. And so this is just a benchmark of where historically things have been, and I think the measure for all of us will be how we can make that difference in the long-term plan and telling and bringing people with us to change that story. We certainly can't do it alone. So again, thank you. I think any negatives that we've discussed are very much challenges for us as governance to resolve. And I congratulate you for the very easy measure that the auditors took us through any concerns they had, and the fact that they were very, very light in them. So it was one of the easiest audit processes I've ever seen. So thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Because I've had a bit of time on my hands, I've actually read this whole report, and I have to confess in the past I haven't always read the whole annual report.
Yeah.
But
Michael, could you just try and speak up a little bit? I think.
Turn the audio up.
Is that any better now, Andrew?
Not really. And we're as high as we can go here.
Oh,
the volume.
So
we're not that high.
With the volume.
I'll try it again, but is that any better, Andrew?
No.
Oh, all right.
Can you get yourself closer to the computer? I had to do this last night with it.
I'm almost swallowing it, Marion.
That's better.
That's better.
It doesn't look better.
Yeah, as I was just saying before you all interrupted me,
I did read the whole report. I finished up with 2 observations, and they're generally in line with what Hilary and Kate have been saying. It made me proud to be a councillor. I'm proud of the document because of the way it's been written. As an annual report, I think it's outstanding. I'd like particularly the fact that it had a good deal more introductory prose than we've had in the past, and that was necessary this year. And the other thing that made me proud was the detailing of the achievements of ORC in that 12-month period. It was when you look at this report, you realise it was a pretty outstanding period. I'm glad that Michael Laws raised the question of page 19 because I was going to as well. Both of those graphs bothered me, and I'm looking forward to hearing Gavin, Gwyneth, whoever, give us some more explanation about those water quality measures, how they were achieved, and what we can take from them, because I struggled to take anything from them at all, except that they were a mess. So those were my comments, Andrew. Thank you to Nick and the team. It's an outstanding report in both ways, both quality of reporting and quality of work achieved, and I thank you for it. That's me.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. Further speakers? Kevin.
Yeah, probably if I could go back to Councillor Forbes on the measures that some where there's a red dot appears that we haven't done very well. And one of the things the auditor did say is that we've got to be very careful that when we're describing what we are actually measuring, that we actually do give ourselves a pat on the back for very good things. So that would be something like we could have to stack 100 blocks in an hour, but we only get to 99. So was it a failure? Well, actually, it was a pretty good effort, and that's the trouble with those sort of comparisons. So the auditor has asked us to look at those measures to make sure that they do reflect what we've actually been doing. So that was pretty exciting. If I just look, I need to go back to this page 19 because I read it slightly differently. My comment on the lakes one would be that does bounce around a heck of a lot, but if you read the line underneath that, there was only 8 samples. Yeah. So if you're only taking 8 samples per year, you've only got to have a slight variation on one of them. Can actually throw a graph out quite dramatically.
Yeah,
so they've, with Gwyneth will actually come back with the exacts, but I mean, that was my reading of that side. But if I go back to the one before, which I think to me shows an absolutely exciting trend on the work that catchment groups and council have been doing. And if we look at the 2013 to 2018 period, where we had 62% of our rivers, I'll get on to the poor ones later, we had 62% of our rivers in good to excellent condition. And the latest period, the 2015 to 2020, we have 67% of our rivers in good to excellent condition. That is also based on the 2013 to 18 period, where we had 63 tests. And now we're doing 106 tests. So not only they're improving, but they're being more rigidly tested. So that, to me, is an excellent, it's a good trend. A good trend. We've still got to watch it. But if we also look at 2013 to 2018, where we had 19% of our rivers in poor condition. Right, so the alarm bells would have been going off. So, but if we look at the 2015 to 2020, there's now only 15%. So that's actually, if I put it in percentage, that's a 21% improvement on getting the poor ones into a better grade. So and again, that's based on 63 tests in the 2013 to 2018 and 106 tests on the 2015 to 2020. So the trend is looking good. We've got a long way to go, and I won't step away from that, but there's clearly some very good work being done by people, by catchment groups, by council, by communities, down the right track to where we're actually heading. So I just need to commend that. Well, I just have to say, councils were given, I think, another 3 months or an extension to the end of the year to get these annual reports done. Our team, and it is part of our team, they have banged it out in the normal time. were very humble about it when we tried to praise them at the audit and risk meeting, said, well, that's just part of our job. Well, I'm just saying, tremendous job, Nick and your team, to Sarah. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Further speakers? Brian.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. I actually look forward, to Gwyneth's presentation on those two graphs so that we can actually learn from it. One of the complicating issues is that we've increased the number of sites, state of the environment sites, so it's actually pretty difficult to compare what the hell's going on. And we need to learn from it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, look, just a couple of comments. I want to start with Sarah first. I think this is the first full financial year you've been in charge of the Waka, so to speak. I think you came on board in February 2018.
19. Yep.
Well, yeah. Well, first I want to acknowledge your contribution. If it's the first or the second, that you've turned the ship around. You've created a good culture in the organisation, and to all your staff that work under you, I just want to acknowledge it's been a pretty challenging year. When you look back on what's been in front of us, particularly the COVID situation in the second 6 months of the year. Emergency management, they were obviously under a considerable amount of pressure to deliver and in their role, which only pops up. They plan for these sorts of things, and I'm sure they were well equipped and did well, but it was a significant workload that they picked up during that period. Also, I want to acknowledge the planning, policy and consent staff. Once again, that's a department, both those departments are under a pretty heavy workload, and they've got a lot coming at them, whether it's consents from the community to operate a water permit or other consents, or whether it's implementing central government policy, the new water reform policy. And the other area I think is worth mentioning, and thank you for all the comments about water quality in particular, but another space I believe we've moved forward in is public transport. And I know some of those improvements have only hit the ground in more recent times with the B card, etc., in early September or whenever it was. But during the last financial year, I think the passenger transport service has gone to a new level. And I know we're still on a journey to implement other improvements further down the track. But the feedback that I hear on the street is very positive about PT in general. Sure, we get complaints when some of those issues to do with a bus running late or a shelter is in the wrong place or whatever. But generally speaking, it's a service that's on the up, and the community, I believe, are appreciating that. Any further speakers? If not, now the recommendation essentially is that we receive the report, approve and adopt. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back to the actual. It's up. Thank you. And Liz, thank you for adding the additional fourth recommendation. Acknowledge with gratitude the work of staff in putting together the report. Thank you, Kate. And Hilary was okay with that. Alex, you're obviously okay with that because you seconded it. So no, good as gold. And you suggested it. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put those four recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and pass on our thanks to your team, Nick. Okay, moving on to item 10. This is the COVID-19 Councillor Working Group update, and this report is provided to update the Council on recent activity of the COVID-19 Jobs for Nature Working Group. Gavin, welcome. And we are to receive this and note the work of the group. Councillors on that group may want to make comment in a moment, but I'll just hand it over to Gavin in the first instance.
No, I'll take it as read, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillors that are on the group, Brian and others, would you like to, Brian?
Can I speak to the report?
Absolutely.
And what page is this?
Page 185.
There's a lot of tapping that I've got to do.
You can shift it along with your little finger. He's doing it. He's getting it slowly.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah.
We'll get there quicker than you've got to the march the other day, I promise you.
those directions that Kevin gave me were quite good compared to Middlemarch. Hey, no, look, thank you. We've got a working group, and I firstly want to acknowledge those that are on the group. You know, Kate beside me, Alexa, Gretchen, who's not here, Gavin, Mariana, Andrea, and others, and we all treat ourselves as equals. Some frank discussion. It's actually quite a complicated business, this whole process, and there's a whole spectrum of points, and some of them we talked about in our only discussion this morning, but I will like to make some points. And the first point is that in this whole COVID thing, there are some positive things going on. For example, central government is funding in the order of $5 million. That's public information. It will be discussed confidentially later this afternoon, but there are technical details. Also, Wilding Pines, we've got a $14 million project, and I understand that approximately half of that is due to COVID. So, you know, just those two is $12 million. Also, there have been some applications to the Freshwater Fund that this council has supported and been involved in. And also this council has representations on an alliance with other key stakeholders, Southland Dock, I think Ngāi Tahu and others. Now, from a working, so there are things going on. From the working group perspective, we are after some direction from council, so we're reconnecting. This is not a straightforward process for us. In relation to the, alliance applications that are being considered, we're not actually privy to them. But we can foresee a situation potentially where there'll be various applications that'll miss out. And so the question is to the council, should we be supporting those or certainly considering supporting those applications? We've also asked Gavin and his team to come back and identify, are there any projects on a potential LTP that can be accelerated, and should, if the council was in a mind, should they be supporting those? So when it comes to should we be initiating new projects, I think we're finding that that's actually a bit of a challenging task. But nevertheless, I think one of the key things that's been identified in the report is what are the principles that as a council, that as projects come on our table, what are the principles that we should be analysing these projects and supporting them or not, if we're of a mind to? And we've identified three. For example, do they match the strategic vision? Does it create short-term jobs? Does it match the available workforce? And some of the feedback, I think, from our CE, Sarah said that actually those principles need to be more granular. And Councillor Deaker came out with some good words in terms of maybe they need to be clearer. And I think Councillor Deaker may have a motion. So, what is the space that we're in? There's positive stuff going in, but are we of a mind to fund projects that meet a particular criteria? And bearing in mind that we've got some huge tasks ourselves as an organisation in terms of delivering our LTP, and at some point, central government funding may pause. So the day after the elections, as Councillor Laws. So there it is. It's a bit of that's a little bit of a background. So we're slowly building up a head of steam, but it's a bit of there's a bit of grey mist out there. Alexa and Kate might want to speak.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I mean, you summed up really got, and we've had really, really good help and input from staff on this too, and Mariana, which has been great. Thank you, appreciate that. I think where I've got to in my mind, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, although I did a bit this morning, is that we have to be, I don't believe it's up to us to be coming up with projects unless they're already in our long-term plan and to bring them forward, or maybe we did come to that point. And I do believe that, so I don't believe we come up with anything new. Basically, there's plenty in there to be getting on with, and and many that could bring jobs in. And secondly, we have to keep our ear very close to the ground and really watch what's going on in the Alliance and elsewhere to make sure that if there is really good stuff that meets our strategic directions and our strategic plans, that it doesn't slip away because it's only got a certain amount of, it's missing a bit of funding. But I think we need to be ready to, we need to be very nimble in this space for all of the reasons that have been outlined, and we do need to be very aware that staff have a lot of pressure over the next few years, the LTP anyway. So we've got to be careful, but we need to not do nothing either.
Thank you. Before I go to Michael, Kate, was there anything that you're good?
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me better this time. I wanted to talk about points 11 and 12 of the report in front of us, and I'm prompted by Brian. Thank you for that, mate. I'm not sure about Alexa's use of the word nimble in this area. I think we need to be focused. We need to be laser sharp on what we do in terms of guiding investment into initiatives within our region. I know that they may be pan-region, but talking of Otago, what we want is to match the investments that we can make or guide to our strategic priorities with sharp precision. So I'm going to suggest, in fact, I'll move that the CE produce for the council and for this working group in particular, a one-pager summarising the strategic goals of this council over the next 3 years as they apply to this COVID so that decisions can be made according to those strategic priorities. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. That's what I want to see happen, so that we've all got the benefit of a terse reminder of why we're here, what our goals are for now and the next couple of years. Thank you.
I'll just ask you to repeat the suggested motion. Thanks, Michael.
I was hoping you wouldn't.
He might mean strategic outcomes relating to the goals we've already produced.
I think that's where, yep.
Yeah, that
you try again, Michael.
No, I'm reasonably happy with what Hilary's just said. What we need is a one-pager from the CE which reminds us of what outcomes we are seeking between now and, say, 2023, which may be enabled as outcomes by the investment opportunities that we now have in front of us.
Okay, just bear with me for a second.
I think that's it. You can raise it. I think it's
in your report. It's recorded. You recorded it. Yeah.
Watch.
Andrew, I should have had that written down, and I apologise.
Michael, are you able to see the shared screen?
Yes, I am.
Might be a long page.
Could be double-sided.
I think it's the outcomes relating to the strategic priorities we already have in our.
Yep, that's true. Liz, what you've got there, Liz, is perfect, but I would insert what Hilary has just said relating to the. Yeah, that's good. No, priorities, not outcomes.
Yes.
Priorities. You're in your keep today.
To our strategic priorities.
To.
Because they're already expressed in our documents.
Okay. Okay, just hold that thought for those three, and then we'll just go to. We're not speaking to the motion yet. We've still got questions, or are we finished with questions?
I've got one question.
Marion's got quick. Kevin, yours
I was
question.
just happy to second
Okay.
Councillor Deaker's motion.
Okay. Righto. So moved by Michael D, second by Kevin. We'll go to question from Marion.
Yep, and then later on I will add.
Okay,
one
good.
to that
Okay,
debating
Marion,
point.
questions.
It's a question on 12. You had a set of criteria. Does the activity match our strategic vision? That's good. Does it create short-term jobs? That's really central government's thing, and we're adopting it. That's there. That's the reason why they're putting the money in. Does it match the available workforce? Which? The workforce that's unemployed? The workforce we need? What is it? What's meant by this?
Through Mr. Chair, it was recognised by the group that if the primary purpose is to create jobs for people who are presently out of work, we needed to understand what their needs are and their skills and their capability, their geographic distribution. And so the group agreed it needed more information on that. Okay. And so we have a briefing from MSD on the 7th of October.
Thank you, dear. That's right. That gives some clarity.
Any further questions? Michael.
Yeah, I'd like some clarity on that one too, please. For example, in clause 7, yes, that's right, we have hundreds and hundreds of short-term jobs available in the horticulture and viticultural industry from about December ongoing until April, May. And the greatest problem, ironically, in Central and the Lakes is not that people don't have a job, it's that we do not have enough people for the jobs that will be available during that period of time.
So question?
Yeah. So the definition of short term is interesting to me. When you talk about short term, that usually means to me 6 months, or up to 6 months. I'm sort of interested in what that definition is from the working party's point of view.
And
for how long the job is supposed to last as well.
To be honest, we brought that along to council to get your feedback on it. So, Michael, I would be asking you that question, but I think as Marion said, that I think the government does have an immediate focus on getting some quick jobs.
But there are jobs going to be there.
Yeah, but they're not there. Okay, well there you go. But so, what do you think? Does that meet the requirement?
Oh no, you see, it's having played this role before in a different capacity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the ORC is moving into. I'm not going to caution you against it. Good on you for being bold. And it may be a very important role the Working Party plays and the ORC in the future. But you're moving into an area you've never been in before, of which there is little experience and probably no expertise, and not just us as a governance team, but also in the wider staff area, of literally creating jobs out of nothing to try and place people who are unemployed. And that requires a degree of knowledge, first of all, of the job market, and second, of liaison with people who are employers or potential employers. It also asks you to play another role. Are you going to be a funder? Are you going to be an administrator? Are you going to be the paying agent? Are you going to provide the supervision, the safety? All those various questions that need to be asked and answered. For me, Brian, in the short term, we probably don't have a short-term job problem in Central Otago and the Lakes because we're going to have a labour shortage in the next 6 to 8 months. The question is, what happens from winter onwards next year? And I would suggest to you, once that work dries up, there is going to be a real issue of unemployment in those regions. Would you agree, Alexa?
Actually, just before we go any further, to go to Alexa or Brian, I'm just going to ask Sarah just on the fundamental question around our role in this whole COVID-19 recovery, with a focus on what this working group is looking at.
Sure. Councillor Laws what you describe is quite different from the role that we're playing. So we're not in the business of creating jobs ourselves or identifying labour markets ourselves. The role that we are playing is in support of applications in some ways. So applications of others to, say, the Freshwater Improvement Fund. Yes, we have our own, but that's not primarily because we wanted to create jobs. It's also because we've got freshwater obligations and freshwater management obligations, and it allows us to seek funding for that purpose. In addition to that, even through the DOC Alliance steering committee work that I'm doing, again, me as the CEO of Otago Regional Council, it's not about me generating jobs, it's about making an assessment of other people's applications in terms of whether they meet the various criteria that would be required, so the environmental outcomes as well as the job outcomes. So we don't have staff who are spending time looking at the job market and what projects we might do to create jobs for that market. What we do have is staff helping others who have proposals that they want to put forward for funding. And in a couple of cases where we have been able to line up with our own freshwater aspirations, we have also made applications to the Freshwater Improvement Fund. So I think it's quite a different thing to what you were imagining.
Well, you see, this is the first time the working party's come back, so when they say about...
We've had more than one report.
No, this is the first time this working party's come back and said that these are the 3 principles that are guiding us.
Yeah, and this is the first formal report. We've had some updates correct. From Brian,
that's
either
right.
via email or informal settings. Okay.
Just, if I may just comment on the criteria at paragraph 12. They were really just very, very preliminary, almost prerequisites that anything that council did would need to meet those kind of things. They were not seen as criteria for selecting projects or activities. There's a lot more work to be done, guided by really what do you want to achieve. Is it about the short term, the longer term? Is it limited to jobs for nature type things, or are you thinking more broadly around the infrastructure type stuff? So really there's a lot more thinking to be done around what is your intended outcome.
So it was to probably stimulate some thinking, and that number 3 recommendation probably just takes that thinking to the next stage for Sarah to do some thinking in terms of guiding our thoughts going forward.
Well, it comes down to the process around recommendation 3 as to where that fits with the working group you've established. But really, this is just a progress report. It's not actually seeking endorsement of anything other than just where the working group's got to at a very early preliminary stage.
Yep. Alexa, was there anything, sorry to cut you off before, but was there anything you wanted to add at this point before I go to Marion?
No, I think that's okay. We do have, there's a lot of technical issues around, do people that are losing their jobs in the ski areas, do they have, or in tourism, have they got jobs in the orchards? There's a whole pile of barriers there that we have to listen to from MSD, but that's probably not the focus of where we're at.
Marion.
Okay, and in a sense, I'm responding to feedback. I think you're asking for feedback, and I talked this morning, I'm not going to repeat that, but in a sense, if you're asking us criteria, one of the criteria to me, and I think this was a discussion that you and I had, Alexa, right at the beginning, was kind of, we've got an economy, particularly in Central Otago, that's being based on short-term, low-paid employment, people moving through. And I really wanted us to move to a sustainable employment pattern on a better rate of pay, okay? That's in my head. To do that, some projects have to get up and off the ground. And in some of those projects actually fitted with our work around our strategic vision, in terms of biodiversity and stuff like that. There's something else I want to say to us. The kiwi fruit harvest was got in during level 4. Quite bloody amazing. I would love to know how and who pulled the loops and what happened. And if it was possible for your connections to come back with us and tell us that story, I think it has something to say to cherries and grapes, okay? And it has something out there in the future that we might be able to pick up on. It blows me away. I saw something, again, on my source of stuff, which told that story, and I was quite blown away by it. But one of the things that I'm hearing all the time from friends going into Queenstown for the first time in 15 years is, hey, we're going to see our own country. Isn't this lovely? And from people working in gift shops in Queenstown, isn't this fabulous? I'm selling things to fellow New Zealanders that were created in New Zealand. And they're talking about they want desperately to move away from the low-paid workforce, you know, into some sustainable tourism and to some sustainable work about biodiversity. I mean, that's why I love, though I sat in Cromwell the other day and looked at a bike that went straight up a hill like that. I think it was a bike track, and then down round the Clutha. And I freaked on it, and I thought, no, that's for the younger version. But all those bike tracks fit into that same thing in a sense. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So that was just feeding back to you both.
Any further speakers? Kevin.
Before you put the motion?
Yes.
Right, Kevin. Just a couple of things in backing up Councillor Dika, but I think one very important thing is we don't miss an opportunity. But I go back and I'm going to raise a terrible word that I did say this morning. We've actually got to stick to our knitting. We've got to be very mindful that we have stated so many times in this chamber that we have a huge amount of work coming down from government, and that's without COVID, without a southerly coming through, without anything happening. So we need to be very well resourced. We need to stick to that and make sure we're doing that. Staff are on track to do that. We need to support and ensure that's happening. If things come along, well, we may have to readjust, but we need that list from Sarah so we can actually focus our own minds on what we are really here to do, and we need to make sure we've got that nailed, because in 3 to 5 years when this money runs out, as I'm agreeing with Councillor Hobbs, that there will be stuff for us to pick up, as there always is, so we need to be very careful that we're sticking to the core roles that we have. So, and at that stage, I'd like you to put that motion.
No further speakers.
I'll get hooked.
If not, I'll put the three motions all together. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your contribution. Moving on to reports back from councillors. Thank you, Councillor Malcolm and Forbes, Kevin and Alexa, for your written updates. Is there anything you wanted to add, Kevin or Alexa? Pretty
no, I think
self-explanatory.
Pretty straightforward. Has anyone got any questions? I wanted to talk to Kate about some of the transport things that have happened, but I'll do that. I could write you a big email, but I'll do it later today.
There has been some movement on Lake Hayes. I think I've had a conversation, I can't remember, in the order since then, which is which has made people a little bit happy.
So just hang on, just one wee jiffy. So Alexa, you're all sorted?
Yes, unless anyone's got any questions, happy to answer.
Yeah, so Lake Hayes that Marion mentioned is...
Lake Hayes, there are things going on there. There's a group that have come in, and every group with a big proposal somewhere. I don't know what's public, what's not. I'll just leave that one out.
Okay. All good. Well, no other questions for Alexa. Kevin? You want to highlight anything? Take it as read.
Any questions on it? I'm happy to field or any explanations on it. No problem at all. But I'd just like to make one comment on the staff that and I've only just recently gone on to the Manahira Care Reference Group, but the staff presentations and the work that has been done, I just think it's been quite superb. And I'm not just saying that, I actually literally mean that. And when we have a new staff member, Anna Ferguson, come on board with a presentation that she had on very limited knowledge of of the catchment. Look, I think it was just quite superb, and she actually an audience that is. You could say there's some apart from me, there's some quite difficult characters in amongst it. She actually captured this whole audience, and I just thought it was quite superb. But everyone that's been dealing with this group, and I just have to go back to my opening statement that the whole group seems to work in a very, very strong, very positive, and very collaborative manner at the moment, and they are all thinking of a long-term solution. So. Pointy end coming up, but I can't see that actually changing. Or if it does change, I think there's enough structure and guts in what's been done to guide things along the correct direction. So, well done, staff.
Thanks, Kevin. Hilary.
Sorry, if that Kevin reported by email to us, could we have that report incorporated just into here?
Yep. So it's you're happy to table it today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Cool.
So it goes into the minutes, so as a record.
Yep.
That's all.
Yeah.
You're okay with that, Liz?
You want me to table it?
No, just cut.
No.
Yeah,
just when it turns up as
all that verbiage in the minutes.
No. We want what Kevin sent us round in an email as a report to turn up in the minutes.
Yeah.
For when we confirm them next time. So they.
And next time meet the deadline.
Yeah,
I know your meeting was probably after it.
No,
does that make sense? No? Is it not?
Maybe just to attach it to the document.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's exactly what we're going to do. And next time I'll send it to you in a Word document, so it's a lot easier.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
So all done and dusted there. We note those two reports from Alexa and Kevin. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Are you speaking to the motion, Brian?
I was just going to do another brief report.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay, go for it, and then we'll.
No, just in relation. Look, I think I've kept you up to date with emails in relation to the new catchment group entity.
Yes.
And in the short term, I think staff are going to provide a report encapsulating everything. At some point, an MOU will be established, and there's some detail around that. But in the meantime, they're getting on with things. It's very exciting. But at some point, there will be a formal report. Is that fair, Andrea? She's nodding her head. So, yep, all good.
Okay, thank you for the three of you for your reports. Yep. And before I actually put the motion, I just need to check with both Michael Deaker and Carmen to see whether they have any queries or questions.
I'm very happy that your chair known.
Cool. Michael? Okay. I'll put the motion that those three reports are noted. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. I'm not 100% sure who seconded that motion. No, Gary did. I moved, Gary seconded. Okay. Moving on to the recommendations from the council committees. Someone like to move the resolution passed at the Strategy and Planning Committee meeting on this?
As a bulk vote.
That'd be lovely. So you're moving 12.1, 12.2 and 12.3. That these committee meetings, all the minutes are adopted.
Someone's going to the toilet.
Hang on.
Please mute them ASAP.
En masse. Who seconded? Hilary moved. Who seconded? Wilson.
That's doable.
You sure?
Yeah.
Sound like
I'm just hopeful.
You're okay. Yes. I'll put those three motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried.
You might need a water test there, I think.
13. I'll move that the public be excluded, and this is based on Lagoima section 48 and sections 7. That the following discussions being consideration of minutes of the public excluded, council meeting on the 10th of September 2020, National Wilding Pine Funding Round 2020-2024 and government funding CIP of flood protection be considered in non-public. I move, second by Kevin, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Just noting that Andrea and I think Michelle
Yes.
are both to stay here for the non-public. And I now close the public meetings.